Hello there, this is a presentation that I have created for students in Kiev, Ukraine. It is on the subject of creativity, resilience, and homes. Before we start a discussion on the relationship between creativity, resilience, and homes, we have to be clear what we mean by these concepts. Creativity has a lot of different definitions. There are for each field, whether you're an artist or a scientist or humanities researcher, the concept of creativity will be different. The definition will be different. My favorite definition for creativity is that it's the art of making something valuable out of nothing. When I was conducting my research into creativity, a lot of entrepreneurs would use this definition. They would say, well, I'm creative because I am really skilled in making business that is really valuable and productive out of nothing. So I quite like this definition, that it's the art of making something valuable out of what seems to be nothing. Resilience, likewise, has many different definitions. Very often people will say, well, I'm resilient because I bounce back. I'm very good at bouncing back from trauma, from challenges, from all kinds of things that don't go well. A company or myself, my team, we're very resilient. We know how to resolve problems and to come back, bouncing back basically. But I think that resilience is even more than simply bouncing back. For me, resilience is, again, an art where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This is similar to the Japanese art of Mitsugui, where something that has cracks in it, like a plate or a bowl that has cracks in it, you mend it in a way that it looks even more beautiful than before it was broken. That I think they often use gold threads, and they mend it in a way that it is very artistic. So the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And homes, again, very often we think of our physical homes, but in this discussion, I'd like to share the concept of homes being much more than simply physical places. So our homes are integral to our identity, and this is not just the physical home, it's an integral part of our values and our beliefs. And when we are experiencing times of war, as so many countries around the world are at this point in time, war can destroy not only the physical, but also our emotional, intellectual, and spiritual well-being. And our homes are connected at the emotional level, at the intellectual level, and the spiritual level, not simply at the physical level. So if creativity is the art of making something valuable from nothing, and resilience is the art of synthesizing the whole to be greater than the sum of its parts, how do we protect, restore, and rebuild our homes for the body and also for our heart, for our mind, and our spirit? So this is the discussion that we will engage in. So first of all, let's go back to that concept of a house versus a home. A house is tangible. We can see a house. It's a physical place, but a home is a concept. A home is a conceptual container. It's a clear place, a clear space, and it's temporal, it's relational, and it's also symbolic, but it has parameters. A home has boundaries. It has parameters, it has boundaries. There's an inside of a home and there's the outside of the home. And within the boundary, what's on the inside is private, it's personal. We expect our home to be a place where there is privacy. It's a personal space where we feel we have ownership, whereas outside of that boundary of the home, The public space, that's a social space where we don't have the privacy. We don't expect privacy as we do in our homes, and we expect that space to be shared rather than for us to have total ownership of that space outside the boundary. So if we use the circle as symbolic of home at the body level, at the heart level, at the mind level, and at the spirit level, inside the home, we have these inner drivers, the I and the we. The we includes those that we are willing to share our home with. And outside of that boundary, it's they. And they we can think of as the social pressures. And so there's the inner drivers and there's the external social pressures. And the expectations of what's inside the home are different to the expectations, the pressures of what is outside the home. So inside the home, in terms of our physical needs, in terms of the body aspect of the home, the tangible, we expect our homes to be safe, a place where we can look after our health and take care of our hygiene needs. In terms of our heart, we expect to experience love and happiness in our homes. At the level of the mind, we expect ourselves to have power and prestige. Power as in we can choose, we can make decisions, we have ownership of that space. And prestige, we feel valued. Our home is a place where we feel that we are useful, we're valued, we're loved, and there is prestige. Our presence is important. And in terms of the spirit, we may aspire to feel inspired in our homes, a place where we feel optimistic, where life is good inside our home. On the outside, the social pressures at the level of the physical level, society may want us to be clean and pure, to be hygienic. They expect us to be loyal to society, to be altruistic, to make sacrifices, to compromise. And in terms of our mind, society expects us to add something of value to society through our work, or it may not be tangible work, but simply through our presence, our mind contributes to adding value to our society. And according to Greek philosophers, in terms of the spirit, we aspire to achieve what is true, what is good, what is beautiful. And generalizing, we could say that society expects us to be as beautiful as we can be, to be as good as we can be, to be as true to to be aligned to our purpose in life, to be true to our purpose as much as we can be. So we are navigating these internal and external pressures. And in management, we talk about inner motivation, we talk about external motivation, and there's always an interplay of what the individual wants, or the collective that is part of that group, the inner group, what we want as opposed to what they want. What do the others want from us? So we have these different layers of home. We have the physical space where we want safety, health, and hygiene. We have the emotional home where we want love, happiness, and support. We have the home for our mind, which encompasses the culture, our identity, our values, and our beliefs. And at the spirit level, which is a symbolic home, that's the place where we draw on our purpose and mission. What is our mission in life? Why do we exist? What is our purpose in life? That's the symbolic spiritual home. And just as our physical homes are unique, all of our homes, in my view, are unique. We design, we construct our homes to accommodate our physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual well-being. We always return home. You know, in the morning, we may leave our home to go to work, but at the end of the day, we come back home. So our home is always the place where we return after temporarily being away from home. So in my view, when we feel optimistic, when we feel peaceful, when we feel benevolent, that's when we are at home. That's our permanent state. When we feel that our mind, we're wise, we are prosperous, we feel love, we feel happiness, we feel healthy, that's when we are at home. That's our permanent state. That's normal. It's normal to be healthy, but temporarily we may be sick. We may be sick, but we are aspiring to come back to that place where we feel healthy. We may feel sorrow temporarily. We may feel grievances temporarily, but we're coming back to that place, that normal place where we feel gratitude, where we feel happy. Temporarily, we may feel that there's scarcity, but we come back to that place where we experience prosperity. We temporarily face destruction and conflict and pessimism, that those are temporary states, and we come back home to that space where we feel optimistic again. And so when our optimism is broken, when our sense of prosperity is damaged, and we don't feel that we have very much to feel grateful for, all of those are when our homes for these different levels are damaged in some way, and then the resilience comes in to mend, to repair our homes at the different layers, to repair them so that we can come back to our normal state. And this image is the concept of the Japanese art of Mitsugui, where a broken bowl looks more beautiful after it has been repaired. And this is what I mean by the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The fragments, when you put those fragments together and you create something even more beautiful than that, something that existed before, that beauty adds additional value. So it's, for me, when our homes are damaged at different levels, we have to find our way back to health from sickness. We have to find our way back to love from hatred, back to prosperity from scarcity, back to optimism from pessimism. And so when we find our way back, we may be even healthier than previously. That's where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We may be even stronger because that temporary illness has developed our immune system, so we are even stronger. We may experience a much deeper level of love. We may be even more prosperous. We may be even more optimistic than we were previously. That for me is resilience. It's not simply bouncing back to that state we were at previously. It's bouncing back and becoming more beautiful, more loving, more prosperous, more optimistic. So we're talking about the whole, and for me, the whole is everyone. When we include the whole, we're thinking about everyone, we're thinking about humanity, we're thinking about the animals, we're thinking about everything that exists, everything. And so at the level of humanity, we can think about the I. Obviously I is really important in terms of ecology. And then there's the we, and we can include you, he and she, we can include in they. So if we chunk humanity into three parts like this, where we've got the personal, we've got the shared personal, which is we, and then we've got the impersonal the they, he, she, it, all of that is they. How do we relate to these different segments of humanity? Well, I think we can approach our relationship between ourselves and others in different ways, depending on the context. For example, when we are going through very turbulent times such as war, death, divorce, loss, or uncertainty, we may have a very defensive approach to how we relate to they as opposed to how we relate to we. And when we are more settled, when we are successful, things are looking good and we're thriving, we may take on a more expansive approach. And when we are flourishing, we feel very powerful, we're very progressive, we can take on an embracing approach. So let me just explain what I mean by these three approaches: the defensive approach, the expansive approach, and the embracing approach. The defensive approach is very often our behavior towards they during war, during death, divorce, loss, uncertainty. The boundaries of our homes are clearly marked and defended with this approach within this context. And we have a very clear sense of who is allowed to be in and who needs to remain outside these boundaries. There is very clear distinction between this is us and that is them. You know, there's a great distance between the I and the we and they. And in contrast, during times of peace, when we feel settled, we're successful, we're thriving in an environment, and there's common ground between the I and the we and they, we may relate to many different groups of they, and there are overlaps, there is common ground. So the space between the we and they is not as clearly demarcated as it is during war, during divorce, during loss of other kinds. And in the embracing approach, this is usually in a context when society as a whole is flourishing, we feel powerful, we feel progressive, and we adapt, we assimilate, and the boundaries between I, we, and they intertwine. There's no longer that distance between the we and the they. We are all feeling comfortable with each other, and so there's a lot of common ground, there's a lot of shared space. So the I, the we, and they is intertwined here. And we can choose the defensive, expansive, and embracing approaches to creating homes that are resilient to the impact of they. So we said earlier that at home, at a physical level, we expect to experience health, hygiene, beauty. And when we're away from home, we experience on a temporary basis sickness and neglect and repulsion. Well, during times of war, there's a lot of pessimism, there's a lot of destruction, there's a lot of scarcity, there's grievances, and there's neglect. So how do we use the appropriate approach to becoming resilient to associating they with all of these things that we experience away from home? So, you know, we know what we desire, we know what we're aspiring to, but outside of these boundaries, it's as though they are responsible for our sickness, our hate, our ignorance, and our pessimism. We associate everything bad that is happening to us on the outside with they, you know. So normally, as we said earlier, society is they, but in this case, society it could be the government, it could be the others that we're in conflict with. It's as though they are causing all of these negative experiences. So how do we use our creativity and our resilience to recreate, to reconstruct our homes on a tangible, emotional, ideological, and symbolic level? So let's go back to the art of making something valuable from nothing, and resilience being the whole, which is greater than the sum of its parts. How do we create and recreate? Well, we may design our homes with unique features in the same way that we design our physical home. We try to make it beautiful. We make it a place where we experience love, with our family. We're allowed to learn and to gain wisdom in our homes. And we may feel that the purpose of our home is a place where we can be benevolent. At the very least, we can be a good neighbor. Benevolence is about being good with others, blessing others. So it's a place where we feel that we can be a good neighbor and others can be good neighbors to us. So in terms of the I and we, that's our inner circle. Who are we willing to share these spaces with? And who are we adamant must remain outside our circle? So who are we inviting in to our inner circle at these different levels? And who are we saying that's the boundary and they have to remain outside of that boundary? Each one of us will have very different, unique features. We design our homes in very different ways so that we're comfortable, and our inner circle and our outer circle, depending on the context, will change. So for example, for myself, this is at the physical level. I'm willing to share my home with my family, and I'm not willing to share it with strangers at this point in time, and that could change at different times. But at this point in time, I allow my family into my home, but not strangers. At the level of heart, I include my friends, but I don't include my enemies. Again, this may change. If I become very spiritual, I may include my enemies in showing love also to my enemies. But at this point in time, I choose to love my friends, and I choose to keep my enemies outside of my boundaries. And in terms of my mind, I'm an educator at this point in time. And so my inner circle for my mind, where I get most stimulated in terms of my mind, is educators. And if I find that even educators, if they're being manipulative, if they are lying, if they are not speaking the truth, then I prefer to keep them outside of my circle. So that's where I would draw the boundaries for myself. If somebody is an honest, truthful educator, they become part of my inner circle, or they're allowed in my inner circle. But if they don't meet the standards that I consider to be ethical, then I would like to keep them outside of my inner circle. And humanitarians, I associate with humanitarians in terms of my purpose. It's very humanitarian, and I make friends with humanitarians. But if I find that somebody is oppressive, then I prefer to keep them outside of my my boundary. And so this is, when we are designing our home, we create a blueprint. And I find that very often the blueprint that we use for creating a home at the physical level, it doesn't always include the different layers of home. We may think about, well, we want our home to be beautiful. We want it to be a place where our friends and our family feel they experience love and joy. And it may not always be a place where we think about the comfort or the inspiration for our mind or our purpose in life? Where do we feel most benevolent? And these are just examples. You know, for me, benevolence is a priority. To be benevolent is a priority, but for other people, their unique feature in terms of their purpose may be entirely different. So I would encourage you to think about your home on different levels and to think about how can you create something valuable from nothing in redesigning your home so that it is resilient and it's even more beautiful than before it got damaged. How can you recreate your home so that it starts with your purpose and it allows your mind to thrive and to flourish, in addition to the love that you wish to experience, in addition to the beauty that you wish to experience? One of the things that we notice when we move from one house to another house, or we move from one country to another country, when we've migrated or we've been displaced or dislocated, or our homes are disintegrated for some sort of crisis that may be either part of our own choice or not. You know, it could be through events such as conflict or war or economic pressures, but for some reason we find ourselves having to move or choosing to move from one location to another. And those of us who've been in that situation, where I was born in one country and moved to another country when I was 6 years old, and I've lived in many different places, and on many occasions, I've felt as though I was physically in one home, my body was in one home, but my heart was somewhere else. My mind was in an entirely different place, and my spirit, I felt disconnected from my spirit, my purpose, as it were. So I'm sure at some point in our lives, based on either external or external situations, we may find ourselves feeling that we are not in a home where we feel entirely in alignment with our purpose. We don't feel entirely comfortable. We don't feel entirely as though everything we love is available to us in that particular home. We may feel a sense of disintegration. So one of the ways that we need to use our creativity, which is the art of making something valuable from nothing. How can we use that creativity to synthesize the different fragments of ourselves, using that art, like the Japanese art, where we bring something together, we bring something which had disintegrated or fragmented, and we bring it together to form a whole, which is even more powerful, even more valuable, even more beautiful than the separate parts or the way we were before that disintegration. So how can we create resilient homes, homes that are a protection for the whole of our being, not simply for our physical being, but resilient homes that are homes for our emotional, intellectual, and also spiritual being? So that's the thing to discuss, especially during times of war. How do we keep our spiritual purpose intact? What is the home that will contain our spirit in a way that our spirit is not broken, our mind is intact, our mind is still inspired and stimulated? And how do we ensure that our heart is not broken? How do we mend the different pieces of our heart so that everything we love, we feel that it has remained intact? And remember that these are concepts which are not tangible. Relationships are not always tangible. We can have relationships with people or places that we love that can be far removed from where we are in our physical homes. So our discussion arises from this point. How do we use our creativity and how our resilience to create a blueprint for our homes, which is holistic?